Welcome to Mark Noir Detectives.
Like, subscribe, and stay with the mystery.
Tell me, which part of the world are you watching from?
Start the story.
Chapter 1. The Retreat Beyond the Pines. There are men who can be persuaded to climb a mountain in January for friendship, money, or murder. Nero Wolfe was not one of them. He disliked mountains because they were large, disorderly, and impossible to rebuke. He disliked January because it interfered with orchids and digestion. Snow, in his opinion, was nature showing off without offering anything useful. So when the Blackridge affair began, Wolfe was in his usual chair in the office on West 35th Street, studying an orchid catalogue and frowning at a mislabeled photograph. I was at my desk, sorting bills according to which creditor was likely to become insulting first. The telephone rang at 11:06. A man said, "My name is Arthur Bell. I need Nero Wolfe." Most people do. What kind of need? Murder. That improved the morning. Whose? Harold Mercer's. Mercer was a wealthy film engineer who had made bridges collapse on cue, storms wait for directors, and mechanical oceans drown actors without wetting their shoes. 2 years earlier, he had retired to Blackridge Retreat, an isolated lodge somewhere beyond the northern pines. I covered the mouthpiece. "Harold Mercer has been murdered. A man named Arthur Bell is calling." Wolfe lowered the catalogue. "Who is Arthur Bell?" I asked. "A private detective, former state police. Mercer hired me yesterday and died before midnight." Wolfe held out a hand for the phone. "Proceed," he said. Bell had arrived at Blackridge Retreat the previous afternoon after 12 miles of forest road and one argument with a snowplow driver. The lodge stood above a frozen lake in a bowl of black pines. It was built of stone, dark timber, and money. At night, its long windows shone over the snow like the eyes of an animal. That had decided not to sleep. 5 people were present at the lodge besides Mercer and Bell. Bell was present under the polite label of security consultant, though Mercer privately told him that someone had stolen a valuable design. "What design?" Wolfe asked. "A fire." Wolfe's eyelids lowered. Mercer had spent 18 months developing a fire simulation for film stages, hotels, and expensive homes. It produced the complete appearance of burning logs, moving flames, sparks, ash, glowing cracks, even the sound and odor of cedar, without heat, smoke, or actual fire. No visible screen and no ordinary projection. Mercer called it the hearth ghost, a fire robbed of its purpose, Wolfe said. Bell continued. A rival company, Arclight Systems, had filed papers that morning for a nearly identical device. Mercer had seen the drawings and recognized details taken from his own private plans. He believed one of his 5 guests had sold them. Names, Wolfe said. Evelyn Mercer, his second wife. Former actress. Calm enough to make ice feel emotional. Martin Creel, his business partner for 20 years. Mercer bought him out last spring, and they had been fighting over money and licensing rights. June Larkin, chief optical engineer. She helped create the system and resented Mercer's plan to patent it under his name. Peter Vale, a film producer. Mercer had promised him exclusive rights, then began negotiating with a hotel chain. Samuel Dorr, Mercer's nephew and secretary. He lived at the lodge and controlled the workshop, the correspondence and most of the keys. Wolfe grunted. A household arranged for homicide. "What did Mercer tell you privately?" "That the stolen design contained an error. He said the thief would expose himself during the demonstration." "How?" "He said, 'A stolen secret is never stolen whole. The missing piece will force a choice.'" "Did you ask him to speak plainly?" "Yes, he said I was paid to observe, not educate him. I begin to dislike him. You would have had competition." The main hall occupied half the lodge. It had a high-beamed ceiling, a staircase along the east wall and windows facing the moonlit forest. The fireplace stood at the north end, 12 feet wide and built of grey stone. 6 artificial logs rested behind a black grate. At 5:30, the guests gathered for drinks. Snow moved past the windows in level streams. The hearth ghost was already burning. Bell had held out his hands before realizing the flames gave no warmth. Mercer stood beside it, pleased with himself. "The first perfect fire in history," he announced. Daniel Crowe said, "The first perfect fraud." "Fraud deceives," Mercer replied. "Art delights. The difference is the invoice." Grace Nolan gave a short, nervous laugh. Emily Carter did not laugh. Thomas Reed watched the false flames with a caretaker's suspicion, while Peter Mercer stood by the drinks table with a ring of keys in one hand. Mercer touched a hidden control. Blue flame curled under the logs. A glowing split traveled through one of them. Sparks rose beneath the hood, and the faint crackle of resin came from concealed speakers. Then Mercer turned to his guests. Someone in this room stole the hearth ghost and sold it to Arclight Systems. No one moved. Creel finally asked, "Have you been drinking?" "I have seen Arclight's patent drawings. They came from mine." Emily stood. "Then accuse me. If I programmed half your system, you drew what I instructed. I solved what you could not." Grace Nolan said, "This is a contract dispute, not a crime." "There is no dispute," Mercer said. "There is theft." Evelyn crossed one leg over the other. "Harold enjoys a room more when everyone hates him." Dorr moved toward his uncle, but Mercer waved him back. Bell watched hands and faces. Daniel rubbed the rim of his glass. Emily had gone pale. Grace looked bored because she was frightened enough to need the pose. Peter looked ill. Thomas remained near the door with an unreadable expression. "The design Arclight bought is incomplete," Mercer said. "At 10 o'clock one of you will attempt to correct it. That attempt will identify the thief." "How?" June demanded. "You know enough to be afraid," Bell interrupted. "Mr. Mercer, this should continue privately." Mercer looked at him. "Mr. Bell is an observer. His profession need not concern you yet. That concerned them immediately." Creel put down his glass. "You brought a detective." "A precaution." "A performance," Evelyn said. Mercer smiled. "At 10. Dinner was at 7 and tasted to Bell like sawdust, though the cook had done nothing wrong. Conversation circled the accusation without touching it. Creel asked about the hotel contract. Mercer told him thieves had no rights. June asked whether the workshop remained locked. Mercer replied that it did unless someone had copied Dorr's key. Dorr dropped his fork. Vale complained that the road might close. Mercer said innocence did not require an open road. At 8:20, Grace left with a headache. Daniel said he was going outside to inspect the unstable power line. Emily returned to the hall and sat before the false fire, studying it. Peter helped the housekeeper clear the table, while Thomas checked the service doors. Bell remained near Mercer. At 9, Mercer received a call in the library. The lodge telephone ran through an old switchboard in Peter's office. Bell heard only Mercer's answers. "No, not tomorrow." A pause. "You have waited too long." Another pause. 10 o'clock. "After that, the matter belongs to the police." He hung up. "Who was it?" Bell asked. "A coward." "Which one?" "The useful one." At 9:15, Mercer took Bell upstairs to his workshop. It contained drafting tables, lenses, metal frames, tools, and a steel safe hidden behind a curtain. Mercer opened it and showed Bell a sealed envelope marked Arclight. "Proof. I want you to keep this. If it is evidence, give it to the police. At 10:10. "Why then?" "Because by then I shall know who must be arrested." "What happens at 10? "The fire will fail, visibly." "No, that is the point." Mercer put the envelope back and closed the safe. Bell said, "You just asked me to keep it. I wanted to know whether you would. That is childish. That is testing." "The same thing when done by a rich man." Mercer laughed and sent Bell downstairs to watch the others. He would remain in the workshop until shortly before 10. Bell returned to the hall at 9:30. Emily was kneeling beside the grate. She had removed a narrow brass strip and was inspecting tiny lenses behind it. "Looking for Mercer's defect?" Bell asked. "Yes, found it." "No." "Would you tell me?" "No." Daniel entered from the billiard room at 9:40, still scowling. Grace appeared near the library doors a moment later. Peter came down the stairs at 9:43 and reported that the outside telephone line had gone dead, probably from ice. Thomas remained near the service entrance. At 9:50, the ceiling lights flickered. The hearth ghost did not. The lamps dimmed twice, but the false fire continued its perfect burning. A log settled inward. Sparks climbed. Orange light moved across the faces in the hall. June stood sharply. "That is wrong." Bell looked at her. "What is?" "The system should reset when the current drops." Dorr went to the control box behind the stairs. "It has battery reserve." "Not for the vapor drive." The light steadied. From inside the wall came a soft metallic knock. "Pipe?" Bell asked. Dorr nodded. June said, "There is no pipe in that wall." The mantel clock showed 2 minutes to 10. Mercer had not come down. Bell started upstairs with Peter behind him. Halfway up, a door closed somewhere above. At the end of the corridor, the workshop stood open. It was empty. The curtain had been pulled aside. The safe door stood open. The envelope marked Arclight. Proof was gone. Peter reached for his pocket and went white. My key. Missing? It was there at dinner. The workshop window was latched from within. Snow lay smooth on the narrow balcony. A service door opened into a dark projection compartment above the hall. The key was in the lock on the workshop side. Bell opened it. Inside were mirrors, cables, and an observation slit overlooking the fireplace. A narrow iron stair descended behind the chimney to a maintenance door at ground level. That door stood open. Bell went down first. At the bottom, he pushed a carved wooden panel outward and stepped into the main hall. The guests turned. Mercer lay on the rug beside the hearth. His body rested on its left side, one hand stretched toward the grate. There was a dark wound above his right ear. Near his fingers lay a short iron tool with a hooked end. The false fire burned inches from his face and gave him no warmth. Evelyn did not scream. She said, "Harold," as if correcting him. June moved forward, but Bell stopped her. "Don't touch him." Creel stared at the iron tool. "That came from the workshop." Dorr nodded. "It lifts the lens frame." Vale backed into a chair. Bell checked Mercer without disturbing the body. No pulse. The wound had bled little. Blood marked one edge of the hooked tool. The mantel clock struck 10. At the first stroke, the hearth ghost changed. The flames lowered. The sparks vanished. The false logs faded from red to black. Then a point of blue light appeared beneath the center log. It pulsed 3 times. Emily whispered, "Impossible." "Why?" Bell asked. "That signal can only be triggered from the master control." "Wait, where is it?" "In the workshop." "The empty workshop?" She did not answer. Bell ordered everyone to remain in the hall. He searched them with Peter watching. No envelope. No key. The housekeeper and cook were found in the kitchen. Flowers scattered across the connecting passage showed only their own prints and Peter's. The outside doors were bolted. Snow below every window was unmarked. The storm had covered the road. At 10:30 the generator failed. Darkness swallowed the hall. Someone moved. Bell heard a breath, a shoe scraping wood and metal touching stone. He drew his pistol and ordered everyone still. Dorr found an oil lamp. When its light rose, Mercer's body had not moved, but the hooked iron tool was gone. That, Bell told Wolfe, was when the case stopped being merely difficult and became deliberate. Wolfe asked, "Did you recover the tool?" "No." "The envelope?" "No." "Mr. Dorr's key?" "No." "Did the false fire operate again?" "Yes, at midnight." Wolfe's brows lifted. While they waited for the county sheriff to force his way through the snow, the hearth ghost had suddenly come alive. No one stood near the controls. The logs glowed and flames climbed soundlessly. Then pale words appeared across the back of the grate. "Thief in the cold." They vanished before anyone could photograph them. I said, "A murderer with dramatic instincts." Wolfe ignored me. Who could program such a message? Mercer, Emily Carter, possibly Peter Mercer. The others denied technical knowledge. Denial is not a skill. The sheriff arrived at 4 this morning and sealed the hall and workshop. Why call me? Bell paused. "Because Mercer called you yesterday." I looked at Wolfe. "At what time?" He asked. 3:10. "Your number appears in the switchboard log." No call had reached the office. Wolfe said, "Then someone dialed my number and prevented the connection. Or wished the record to show it had been dialed." "Yes." "What did Mercer intend to say?" "I don't know." "Then you have supplied a question, not a reason." Bell's voice hardened. "Before Mercer died, he wrote your name on the back of the fire system control card." Wolfe became still. "What precisely?" "Nero Wolfe, West 35th Street. Under it, he will understand the cold flame." For a while the office was silent except for a faint clatter from the kitchen, where Fritz was preparing lunch. Finally, Wolfe said, "Mr. Bell, prevent the sheriff from separating the 5 guests until I have spoken with them. Send Mr. Goodwin copies of the telephone log, system record, and lodge plan. Touch nothing connected with the fireplace. The sheriff may not obey you. Then persuade him that failure will be embarrassing. And you? I shall remain here." "That is what I expected." Wolfe's tone chilled. "Expectation is not intelligence. Mr. Goodwin will come to Blackridge." I sat up. "He will? You have often claimed to enjoy snow." I've often lied to improve conversation. You will leave within the hour. Bell warned that the road might close. Wolfe said, Mr. Goodwin becomes resourceful when discomfort threatens him. Then he hung up. I stared at him. Oh, you are sending me into a mountain storm to inspect a fireplace that produces no heat. Yes, while you remain here, yes, among the orchids. Yes, I reached for my coat. Archie, I paused. The phrase thief in the cold may refer to a person, an action, or a condition. Do not decide which before you arrive. I never decide anything before lunch, and take care near the fire. The fire is harmless. Wolfe's eyes met mine. No, he said. The fire is the only witness that has spoken. Chapter 2. A room locked against winter. By the time I reached Black Ridge Retreat, the mountain had disappeared. It was still there, naturally, but snow had swallowed its slopes, its trees, and most of the road that claimed to lead over it. The driver of the hired car stopped twice to inform me that continuing was foolish. I agreed with him both times and paid him enough to continue. At 3:15 in the afternoon, the pines opened and the lodge appeared above us. Black Ridge Retreat looked less inviting in daylight. Grey stone walls rose from drifts that reached the lower windows. The roof sagged beneath white weight, and the chimneys stood against the sky like raised fingers. Nothing moved except loose snow sliding from the eaves. Arthur Bell met me beneath the covered entrance. He was tall, lean, and built in the economical manner of a man who had never needed two movements when one would do. His dark coat was unbuttoned despite the cold. You are Goodwin, you are observant. You took long enough. I stopped to admire the weather. It was trying to kill us, he did not smile. The county inspector arrived before dawn. He has already decided Mercer was not murdered. That should save time. We can go home. Bell took my bag and led me inside. The lodge hall was, as he had described it over the telephone, only larger and colder. The stone fireplace occupied the far wall. Behind its black iron grate, the simulated flames moved over artificial logs with slow, steady grace. They looked warm enough to toast bread. The room itself was cold enough to preserve it. A portable generator throbbed somewhere outside, but the lamps had been turned low to conserve fuel. 2 deputies stood near the stairs. One watched the people in the hall. The other watched the fire. The fire did not watch either of them, but it made a better job of looking intelligent. Mercer's body was gone. A chalk outline remained on the rug beside the hearth, along with several numbered evidence cards. The iron lifting tool that had vanished during the darkness had not returned. Bell set down my bag. The inspector is in the study. I thought Mercer died here. He was found here. That does not mean he died here. That was the first useful sentence anyone had offered me since breakfast. The 5 guests were gathered at the long windows facing the forest. Daniel Crowe stood with his back to the room, heavy-shouldered and grey-haired, holding an unlit cigar. He had been Mercer's business partner for 22 years and his enemy for the last 6 months. Emily Carter sat upright in a leather chair with a blanket around her shoulders. She was the programmer responsible for the timing, control, and visual sequence of the Hearth Ghost system. Her face was narrow, pale, and composed, but the fingers resting on the blanket kept tapping in groups of 4. Peter Mercer, the dead man's nephew, paced between the fireplace and the staircase. He was 30 or close to it, with a handsome face that had not yet decided whether worry improved it. Grace Nolan stood beside the drinks cabinet. She was a private investor who had financed the final stage of Mercer's work. She wore a dark green suit, no jewelry, and the expression of a banker discovering that death did not cancel a debt. Thomas Reed, the caretaker, remained nearest the door. He was a broad, weathered man in his late 50s, with rough hands and a deep crease between his eyes. He had cared for the lodge, its machinery, and its roads for 14 years. All 5 looked at me. Bell said, "Archie Goodwin." "He works for Nero, Wolfe." Crowe turned from the window. "Wolfe is coming here." "No," I said. "He has principles." Grace Nolan's mouth tightened. "Then why are you here?" "To do the unnecessary things required before he tells us the answer." Peter stopped pacing. "Does he know who killed my uncle?" "He knows I have not told him enough." Emily's tapping stopped. "The police say no one killed him." A man's voice came from the corridor. "The police say no such thing." Inspector Rowan entered carrying a folder. He was round without being soft, with sandy hair, reddish eyebrows, and the calm eyes of a man who preferred facts, because they seldom raised their voices. He looked me over. "Goodwin? Inspector? I have heard of you." I deny nearly all of it. He held out no hand. "Mr. Bell seems convinced that Mr. Mercer was murdered." "I am not convinced." Bell said there was blood on the iron tool. There was blood near a wound. "That is not the same thing." Rowan opened the folder. "The medical examiner's preliminary finding is that Mercer suffered a sudden cardiac failure. He collapsed and struck his head against the edge of the grate. The wound did not kill him." Peter stared. "So my uncle had no heart trouble. Most dead men are accused of having excellent health." Bell folded his arms. "What about the tool?" "It may have been lying near him when he fell. It may have received blood afterward. Since someone removed it before my arrival, I cannot examine it. Someone in this lodge removed evidence. Yes, that concerns me. It does not prove murder." I looked toward the chalk outline. "Where was Mercer's right arm?" Bell pointed. "Extended toward the grate. And his left?" "Under him." Rowan closed the folder. "You can inspect the photographs later. First, Mr. Goodwin, perhaps you can persuade Mr. Bell to stop announcing conclusions before he has evidence. I have never been good at persuasion." "Wolfe uses insults." Rowan regarded me for another second, then turned toward the corridor. "The study is this way." Mercer's study was at the western end of the ground floor, beyond the library and below the workshop. Its door was solid oak, reinforced with an iron plate around the lock. A deputy stood outside it with a notebook. The door was open now. But the damage around the latch showed how it had been forced. Bell stopped in the doorway. It was locked when Rowan arrived. "From which side?" "The key was in the inside lock." I entered without touching anything. The room was square, panelled in dark cedar, and furnished by someone who believed comfort encouraged weakness. A broad desk stood near the middle. Filing cabinets occupied one wall. On another hung framed technical drawings of bridges, explosions, burning buildings and artificial storms. 3 windows faced the forest. Each had an interior latch. All 3 were fastened. Snow pressed against the lower panes. Beyond them, the white surface stretched smooth to the first line of pines. No footprints, no broken crust, no track from a ladder, and no place for a man to stand without leaving his name written in snow. A small stove stood cold in the corner. I asked, "When was this room last known to be open?" Thomas Reed answered from behind us. He had followed quietly. "Mr. Mercer used it yesterday afternoon. I brought him coffee at 4. You entered?" I set the tray on the desk. "Was anyone with him?" "No." "Was the window snow undisturbed then?" Reed frowned. Snow had been falling since noon. "I did not study it," Rowan said. "After the body was found, Bell searched the ground floor. The study door was locked. Bell says he heard no movement inside. We left it untouched until I arrived. Why was it important?" Bell stepped to the desk. "Because the missing envelope was supposed to contain evidence against the thief. Mercer kept most business papers either in his workshop safe or in this study. The desk drawers had been opened and emptied by the police. Nothing appeared disturbed except a brass paperweight lying on its side and a narrow strip of blackened paper in the wastebasket. I bent over it. "May I?" Rowan nodded. The paper had been burned along one edge, but the fire had stopped before consuming it. 3 typed words remained. Control sequence 9 below them was half of a handwritten number. As Emily Carter entered and saw the paper, that came from the fire program. Rowan turned. "Explain." "The Hearth Ghost runs through stored sequences. Each sequence controls flame height, log color, sparks, sound, and vapor movement. Sequence 9 is the emergency loop. The one that continued last night." She hesitated. Possibly. The system records every change." "I need access to the control archive," Bell said. "You asked for it at midnight. And you refused, because Mercer was dead and an iron weapon had disappeared." Emily's eyes sharpened. "The archive cannot be used as a weapon. Neither can an envelope usually." I held up the paper. "What would follow the number 42? "A command code. 4 digits. Could it make the fire continue without electricity?" "No." The answer came too quickly. I waited. She looked at me. "Not without some source of power. The lodge lost power. The main supply failed. The generator failed too." "Yes." "And the fire kept burning." Emily moved toward the window. "There may be an independent battery." Thomas Reed said. "There is not." She turned. "You do not know the control system. I know every cable in this building." Crow had entered behind her. "Then perhaps you installed one without being told." Reed faced him. "I installed what Mercer ordered." Grace Nolan joined us, followed by Peter. "Apparently a locked room is like free food. Once people hear about it, everyone arrives." Rowan said, "One at a time." "Miss Carter, can the system operate when disconnected from both main power and generator power?" "No." "But it did. So either it was not disconnected or what you saw was not the system operating normally." Bell looked at me. That sentence was worth saving. I walked to the nearest window. Frost lined the inner edge of the frame. The latch was firmly down. A tiny crescent of frost had been broken near the right corner. Not enough for a tool, but enough to show recent pressure. "Who opened this window last?" Reed said no one. "They are sealed in winter." "Sealed how?" "Rubber strip outside, latch inside." I looked at Bell. "Was the study searched immediately after Mercer's body was found?" "Yes, through the glass only." The door was locked. Curtains open. Room empty. No person. No person. No Mercer. Mercer was in the hall. Then why does a locked empty room matter? Bell crossed to a cabinet beneath the technical drawings and opened it. Inside stood a control panel no larger than a typewriter case. Its face held rows of switches, 2 dark screens and a circular timer. "The secondary fire control," he said. Emily stepped forward. "That should not be here." "You did not know?" "No, the master control is in the workshop. Mercer told me the secondary unit had been removed." Peter said, "He lied to everyone." It saved time. The panel's cover was locked. Rowan produced a small key taken from Mercer's clothing and opened it. Inside, most of the wiring was ordinary. One wire was not. It was a thin silver lead running from the timer into a narrow opening bored through the cedar panel behind the cabinet. Reed leaned closer. "That is new." "How new?" Rowan asked. "The hole was not there when I checked the room last month." Emily touched nothing but lowered her face near the opening. "The lead carries a timing pulse, not power." "To where?" I asked. "Somewhere inside the wall." Reed went into the corridor and counted the panel widths. Then he returned, lifted one of the frame drawings, and revealed a brass screw unlike the others. He removed it with his pocket knife, a narrow section of paneling released with a click. Behind it was a cavity perhaps 3 inches deep, extending vertically between 2 beams. The silver lead ran upward. Beside it hung a small black cylinder wrapped in felt. Rowan used gloves to remove the cylinder. Emily stared. "A thermal cell," Crow said, in English. "It produces current from a difference in temperature." I glanced at the cold stove. "Heat on one side and cold on the other." "Yes, where was the heat?" She pointed upward. "The workshop, or the fireplace duct." Reed shook his head. "The main chimney passes behind the hall, not here." Bell took out the lodge plan Wolfe had requested and spread it across the desk. Reed marked the study, the fireplace, and the upstairs workshop. The wall cavity did not lead directly to either. It led toward the northern corner of the lodge, where the original stone wall met a later addition. "What is there?" I asked. Reed's finger remained on the plan. "Nothing. Wolfe dislikes that answer because buildings, like people, rarely contain nothing where space is available." I said, "Try again." Reed's face tightened. "There is an old ventilation shaft. It was sealed before Mercer bought the lodge. Where does it end?" "Behind the fireplace." Bell folded the plan. "That gives us a connection between this room and the hearth ghost." Rowan said, "A wire connection, and perhaps another kind." Rowan ignored him and looked at Emily. "Could that thermal cell keep the simulated fire running?" "Not the entire system. It might keep the timing circuit alive. Perhaps a small projector or memory unit. Enough for the message. Enough to trigger one already stored. Who could have stored it?" Emily looked toward the others. "Mercer, me, Peter, if he had the password." Peter's face changed, Rowan noticed. "Did you?" "No." "Your uncle's password?" "I knew several," Bell said, "including the workshop control." Peter took a step toward him. "I helped him test the system. Did you program thief in the cold?" "No." "Did you remove the iron tool?" "No." "Did you take the envelope?" "No." He was answering loudly because he had run out of quiet answers. Rowan raised a hand. "Enough." I walked back into the corridor. The air there was colder than in the study. The hall fire was visible through the open library doors. its flames repeating the same graceful bend every 6 seconds. I counted 3 loops. On the 4th, the left flame rose late. I went closer. Belle followed. What? The loop changed. Emily came quickly. She watched for 20 seconds. He is right. What does that mean? It means someone altered the sequence. Recently? It could not alter itself. Rowan joined us. The lodge is operating on the outside generator. Emily shook her head. The hearth ghost control is not connected to it. The portable generator throbbed beyond the wall. Then, with a cough and a descending whine, it stopped. The lamps went out. The hall filled with darkness except for the fireplace. The false flames continued to move. No heat came from them. No electrical hum. No sound from concealed speakers. Only silent orange light rolled across the artificial logs and climbed the stone. Everyone stood still. Grace Nolan whispered, "How is that possible?" No one answered. The fire completed another loop. Then it changed. A narrow blue flame appeared under the center log. It moved from left to right like a finger drawing a line. At the end of the line, the light divided into 5 points. 1 point vanished, 4 remained. Peter said, "What does that mean?" Emily's face had lost what little color it possessed. "It is not part of my program." The 4 lights pulsed twice and disappeared. The orange flames resumed. Belle ordered the deputies to guard both staircases. Rowan sent Reed to restart the generator. I moved nearer the hearth, stopping beyond the chalk outline. The fire looked perfect, too perfect. Then I saw something inside the grate, a thin reflection on the metal rim, no wider than a thread. It ran from the rear corner toward the place where Mercer's hand had rested. I crouched. "What is it?" Belle asked. "Light from the flames?" "No, from something catching them." Using a pencil, I lifted a nearly invisible strand from the edge of the grate. It was clear, flexible, and melted at one end. Emily bent beside me. Optical fiber. Part of the system? Not there. Rowan produced an evidence envelope. What could it carry? Light, a command signal, information. Heat? Not enough to burn. Belle looked at the melted end. Mercer had a thin burn across his wrist. Rowan's eyes narrowed. The medical examiner called it a pressure mark. It crossed the wrist in a straight line, Belle said. Too narrow for a watchband. Emily took a slow breath. A high-intensity fiber can become hot if the light source is powerful and the end is damaged. Hot enough to mark skin? Yes. Hot enough to stop a heart? No. I stood. Unless the mark was not meant to kill him. Belle understood first. It restrained him. Or measured where his wrist was, I said. The fire, the study, and the body were connected before he died. Someone needed his hand in a particular place. Rowan's expression remained cautious, but his eyes had become interested. Reed returned, and the lamps came on. The simulated flames did not flicker during the transfer. They simply continued. I asked Emily, "Can you shut it down manually?" Yes. She went to the control cabinet behind the stairs, opened it, and pulled the main isolation switch. Nothing happened. She removed a fuse. The fire continued. She disconnected the control cable. The fire continued. For the first time, she looked frightened rather than thoughtful. That is not the hearth ghost, Crow barked a laugh. We can all see it. No, she pointed at the grate. The hearth ghost is off. Whatever is producing those flames is something else. The room became quiet. The distinction mattered. Mercer's invention had been turned off, yet the fire remained. Someone had placed a second system inside or behind the first, one independent of the lodge power, the workshop controls, and Emily's programming, a duplicate hidden inside the original, a stolen fire. The telephone in the library rang. Everyone stared toward it. Reed said, "The outside line is dead." It rang again. Belle answered and listened. Then he held the receiver toward me. "For you, I took it. Nero Wolfe's office." Wolfe's voice came over the line, clear and irritated. "Archie, you have arrived. Through personal courage and poor judgment, you have found something. How do you know?" "You answered differently when bored." I told him about the locked study, the concealed thermal cell, the silver lead, the optical fiber, the burn on Mercer's wrist, and the fire that continued after Emily disconnected the legitimate system. Wolfe was silent for 5 seconds. Then he asked, "Who knew the study contained the secondary control?" "Apparently Mercer alone." "Phooey. A secret known by one man and discovered immediately after his death was known by at least 2. What about the locked door?" A locked room is an assertion. Determine who made it. The key was inside. Then the key is part of the assertion. I glanced at the 5. People watching me. Rowan thinks Mercer died. Naturally, Inspector Rowan is entitled to think until evidence requires him to stop. And the burn? Have it examined for residue. Also inspect the dead man's left hand. Why the left? Because everyone is looking at the right wrist. The line clicked and went dead. I returned the receiver to Bell. What did he say? Rowan asked. He wants Mercer's left hand examined. Rowan opened his folder and found the medical photographs. Bell and I looked over his shoulder. Mercer's left hand had been trapped beneath his body. The fingers were clenched. Between. The thumb and first finger was a dark speck, Rowan enlarged the photograph on his camera. The speck was triangular and glossy. Emily stared at it. That is not ash, and what is it? I asked. A fragment of projection glass. Bell looked toward the fire. The flames bent, rose and folded into themselves, a perfect loop. Inside the grate, behind the artificial logs, something made a soft mechanical click. This time we all heard it. Rowan ordered the deputies forward. Reed brought tools. Together they lifted the outer frame, while Emily disconnected wires that no longer controlled anything. Behind the official projection chamber, concealed within the stonework, was a second narrow compartment. It was empty except for a broken glass plate, a coil of clear fiber, and a small metal holder shaped to receive a sealed envelope. The envelope was gone. Scratched into the metal beneath it were 4 words. "The fire remembers everything." Bell read them aloud. I looked at the locked study, the unmarked snow and the flame that had survived. Every loss of power. Mercer had promised that the thief would expose himself when the fire failed. The fire had not failed. It had been replaced. And whoever had replaced it had built the murder into the walls before any of us arrived. Chapter 3, The Flame. That repeated. There are 2 kinds of repetition. One is habit, like Wolfe drinking beer or Inspector Kramer entering our office as if he owned the hinges. The other is machinery, which repeats because it has neither imagination nor shame. The fire at Blackridge Retreat belonged to the second kind. Arthur Bell stood before the hearth with a stopwatch while I sat on the arm of a chair and tried to feel my toes. Inspector Rowan had ordered the false fire left untouched until the hidden compartment could be examined properly. Emily Carter had disconnected every known control. Yet the flames still moved behind the grate. They rose, leaned right, separated into 3 bright tongues, collapsed around the center log and began again. Bell clicked the stopwatch. 47 seconds. Emily shook her head. The standard hearth ghost loop lasts 52. This one does not. Bell reset the watch. The 5 suspects had been ordered to remain in the hall. Daniel Crowe stood near the windows with his unlit cigar. Grace Nolan sat at the long table, making notes on the back of an investment report. Peter Mercer paced until Rowan told him to stop. Thomas Reed waited beside the stairs, watching the fireplace with the offended expression of a caretaker whose building had started keeping secrets from him. The pattern repeated. Bell checked the watch. 47 seconds. Emily folded her arms. A recorded sequence. You said that before, Rowan replied. I said it might be a substitute projection. Now I'm certain. I watched the flames for a 3rd cycle. At the 30-second mark, sparks rose behind the left log. At 38, the center flame narrowed. At 44, a dark streak crossed the back of the grate. Then the sequence began again. Did you see that? I asked. Bell had. Rowan had not. See what? A shadow behind the logs. Emily moved closer. We waited. The flames repeated their little performance. At 44 seconds, something dark appeared near the right edge of the fire. It was there for less than a second, tall and narrow, then vanished as the loop reset. Peter stopped pacing. That looked like a person. No, Emily said. Her voice was too quick. Bell turned to her. What did it look like? An error in the recording. You just said it was a projection. It can be both, Crowe gave a dry laugh. Engineering has become very flexible since Harold died. Emily ignored him. She crouched near the grate but did not touch it. The second system is not generating artificial flames in real time. It is displaying a recorded image of the fireplace. A picture of a fire, I said. A moving picture. The 47-second sequence was filmed earlier and placed on a repeating loop. Rowan pointed toward the dark shape. Then that was present when the sequence was recorded. Possibly, Bell said. You mean someone walked behind the fire? So there is no room behind it. Thomas Reed spoke from the stairs. There is the old ventilation shaft. Too narrow for a man, Emily said. For a full-grown man, Reed corrected. Peter looked at him. What is that supposed to mean? It means what I said. Rowan stepped between them before Peter could improve the conversation with his hands. I watched the next repetition. The shadow was clearer once I knew when to expect it. It did not cross the flames. It rose behind the center log, bent slightly, and disappeared. Downward, it looked less like a person than an arm. Bell had reached the same conclusion. Someone was placing something inside the compartment when this recording was made. Emily stood. That is possible. You designed the visual program. Why did you not notice it before? Because the hidden projector is not mine, but the image is. She looked toward the windows. Bell did not raise his voice. Miss Carter. Emily turned back. The flame sequence is mine, she said. Or part of it is. Rowan waited. She took a breath. Mercer asked me to create several demonstration loops that could run without live controls. He said hotels would need stable displays that could continue during brief power fluctuations. When? 3 weeks ago. Did you make a 47-second loop? No, I made 1 minute exactly. Then who shortened it? Mercer could have. Could Peter? Peter answered before she did. I never touched the program. Emily looked at him. So you knew the access code. That does not mean I used it. Grace Nolan put down her pen. Harold never trusted one system when he could hide another inside it. That was how he negotiated. One contract on the table, another in his pocket. Crow turned from the window. You financed the second system. I financed the Hearth Ghost. You financed whatever Mercer told you to finance. And you sold whatever he forgot to lock away. Rowan stopped them with a look. Bell continued examining the fire. At the end of the next loop, he leaned toward the right side of the stone frame. What is there? Emily joined him. He pointed to a black glass bead set between two stones. It was no larger than the head of a nail. Emily became very still. I said, Another surprise? She did not answer. Bell asked, What is it? A lens. Rowan stepped closer. A camera? Yes. Peter stared at her. You installed a camera in the hall? No. Then who did? Emily looked at the fireplace. Harold. The room went quiet enough to hear the false sparks. Rowan said, You knew. I knew he had considered it. That was not the question. She rubbed her hands together. Though the portable heaters had brought the room above freezing, Mercer asked me 2 months ago whether the system could record while projecting. I told him it could, but the camera would need to be concealed outside the main flame chamber to avoid distortion. And you helped him? I gave him a diagram. Why? He said he wanted to study audience reactions during demonstrations. Crow snorted. He wanted to spy on people. He did both. Bell pointed at the black bead. Where was the recording stored? In the master archive upstairs. The archive we have not been able to open? Yes. What password? I do not know the current one. Peter said Uncle changed it every week. Who knew it yesterday? Rowan asked. No one answered. The fire completed another 47 seconds. Bell moved to the hidden compartment exposed behind the grate. The broken glass plate, optical fiber and metal envelope holder had already been photographed. He examined the rear wall with a flashlight. There is a cable opening here. Emily knelt beside him. That would carry the camera signal to the archive. Would? The cable is gone. It had been pulled cleanly through the wall. Only a scraped metal ring remained where it had passed into the shaft. Thomas Reed fetched the lodge plans. The old ventilation channel rose behind the fireplace, crossed above the library ceiling, and entered the wall beside Mercer's study. From there, a narrow service duct continued upward to the workshop. I said, so the camera could send a recording through the wall to either the study or the workshop. Emily nodded. The master archive was upstairs, but the secondary control in the study could receive a copy. Bell looked toward the corridor. The locked study. Rowan understood. Someone may have entered the study to remove the recording. Without opening the door? Peter asked. Bell tapped the ventilation shaft on the plan. Reed shook his head. No adult could crawl through it. A cable could. So could a hooked tool, I added. The missing iron lifter had a curved end and came from the workshop. It could have reached through the shaft, pulled a latch, moved a key, or removed something from a narrow compartment. Rowan ordered a deputy to bring the medical photographs and another to search the shaft with a lighted probe. Bell asked Emily, how would Mercer review the recordings? Through the study control or the workshop monitor. Could he isolate 1 hour? Yes. The hour of his death? Yes. Could someone erase it? She hesitated, not without leaving a gap. What kind of gap? The archive records time continuously. If 1 hour were removed, the system would show missing time, I said. Unless it was replaced. Emily looked at me. With the 47-second loop, I said. She slowly nodded. The false fire may not only be hiding what happened in the room, it may be filling the missing part of the archive. Bell's expression hardened. Someone copied 47 seconds of harmless flame and repeated it over the hour Mercer died. 76 times. Emily said automatically. Rowan looked at her. 47 seconds repeated 76 times gives just under an hour. There would be a short remainder. Could that explain the dark shape? Yes, the loop may have been cut from a longer recording. Whoever edited it chose the wrong section and left part of himself in the picture. Peter moved toward the fireplace. Then enlarge it. We need the original file, Emily said. The archive is locked, I said. Locks have had a bad week here. We went upstairs. Mercer's workshop remained sealed except for Rowan, Bell, Emily and me. The steel safe stood open, the proof envelope gone. The main control cabinet occupied the wall beside the projection compartment. Emily entered 3 passwords. All failed. Peter had followed as far as the doorway. Try Blackridge, he said. Emily did nothing. Try Evelyn, Crow. Standing behind him said, your aunt has been dead 8 years. He still used her name. The password failed. Thomas Reed called from the hall below. The deputy's probe had found an obstruction in the ventilation shaft near the study wall. Rowan sent Bell to supervise. I stayed with Emily. She removed the control panel and studied the wiring. There is another way. Legal? No. Good. She bypassed the password circuit with 2 leads from a testing kit. The screen flickered and displayed a list of dated files. Most were labeled by demonstration times. One line was blank. The timestamp began at 9:15 the previous night and ended at 10:15. Mercer had been alive at the beginning and dead. Before the end, Emily opened it. The screen showed the hall. Mercer stood beside the fireplace speaking to Bell. The recording had no sound, but the time code advanced normally. At 9:20, Mercer left the room. At 9:28, Emily appeared beside the grate examining the brass strip. She watched herself with a grim expression. At 9:37, Crow and Grace crossed the room. At 9:43, Peter appeared on the staircase. At 9:46, the image froze. Then the fire began repeating 47 seconds again. At the 44th second, the dark shape rose behind the logs. Emily paused the image. We enlarged it. The shape became a sleeve, a hand, and part of a wrist. The hand held a small metal cylinder. On the wrist was a narrow watch with a square silver face. Peter, standing in the doorway, looked down at his own wrist. He wore no watch, Crow. Wore a round gold one. Grace wore none. Thomas Reed's was broad and black. Emily. Carter wore a square silver watch. Rowan looked at her. Emily stared at the frozen image. That is not my hand. The watch is yours, Rowan said. It resembles mine. Where were you at 9:46? In the hall. The recording shows you leaving the fireplace at 9:31. I went to the dining room. Who saw you? She opened her mouth, then closed it. Bell returned carrying a dust-covered metal box recovered from the shaft. Its lid had been forced open. Inside was an empty spool mount and several fragments of magnetic storage film. The missing hour, he said. Emily looked from the box to the image. Rowan moved toward her. I raised a hand. Not yet, he frowned. Goodwin? The hand in the image is wearing Emily's watch, but it is also holding the camera cartridge. Whoever placed the replacement loop knew the camera was already recording. Emily stared at me. I pointed at the screen, and the image shows the wrist from below. The watch face is on the inner wrist. Everyone looked at Emily's arm. Her watch face was on the outer wrist, where most people wore it. The hand in the picture belonged to someone wearing the watch backward. Someone who wanted the camera to identify Emily Carter. The screen flickered. For one frame, almost too brief to see, a face appeared in the polished metal beside the grate. Not enough for identification, enough to show that the person was smiling. Chapter 4. Shadows at the window. Peter Mercer waited until the hidden camera had accused Emily Carter before remembering that he had seen a man outside a window. That did not make the statement false, but it did make it arrive wearing suspicious shoes. Inspector Rowan took Peter into the library, while Arthur Bell continued examining the frozen image from the fireplace camera. Emily's square silver watch remained on her wrist, and the hand in the recording still wore its imitation backward. Someone had expected us to notice the watch and stop noticing everything else. I went into the library with Rowan. Peter stood beside a cold radiator, rubbing his palms together. "You saw a figure outside which window?" Rowan asked. "My uncle's study window." "When?" "Shortly before 10. Perhaps 9:40. You previously said you were on the staircase at 9:43. "I was. I looked down the west corridor before going downstairs. The study door was closed, but the curtains were partly open. I saw someone beyond the glass," I said. "Standing in the snow?" "Yes. Wearing what?" "A dark coat. A hood, perhaps. Man or woman?" I could not tell. "How tall?" Peter's mouth tightened. It happened for a second, but the second lasted long enough for a coat, a hood, and a human figure. I know what I saw. Rowan opened his notebook. "Why did you not report it when your uncle was found dead?" "I thought it was a reflection." "Of whom?" "Someone in the corridor." "The corridor was behind you." Peter looked at me as if I had designed the architecture. To annoy him, Bell entered carrying the lodge plan. "The snow outside the study windows is untouched," he said. "It has been untouched since before Mercer died." Peter shook his head. "Then the person stood on the stone ledge." "There is no ledge. A ladder. No marks below the window. A rope from the roof. The snow on the roof edge is unbroken." Peter's face reddened. "I saw someone." Bell unfolded the plan on the library table. "Show me where you stood." Peter pointed to the upper landing directly above the library entrance, and the figure. At the center study window. Bell looked from the plan to the corridor. From that angle you could see only the left window. Peter hesitated. "I may have been farther along the landing." "Where?" "Near the workshop corridor." "That would place you outside the room where your uncle kept the master archive." Peter turned toward Rowan. "Am I being questioned about a shadow or accused of stealing a recording?" "That depends," Rowan said, "on whether the shadow exists." We returned to Mercer's study. The 3 windows remained fastened. Outside, winter had preserved the ground more carefully than any policeman could. The snow rose almost to the sill and stretched toward the pines in a smooth white sheet. Bell examined the glass from different angles while Peter stood in the doorway. "Show us exactly what you saw." Peter pointed at the middle window. "A dark shape here. It appeared between the curtains, then moved away." "Outside the glass?" "Yes." Bell crossed the room and stood beside the desk. "Could it have been inside?" "No. Why?" "It was behind the reflection of the room. Emily had followed us." She looked at the window and then at the secondary fire control concealed in the wall. "Reflections can be projected." Peter swung toward her. "Now you think I invented it?" "I think this entire lodge was designed by a man who enjoyed making people doubt their eyes." Daniel Crowe stood behind Emily. Harold did not enjoy doubt. He enjoyed being the only man with an answer. Grace Nolan entered last. "Are we all required to attend every new accusation?" Rowan said. "Until someone admits to murder, yes." Bell moved to the curtains. They were made of thick, dark cloth and hung almost to the floor. The left curtain was dry and dusty. The right one had a darker stain along its lower fold. He touched it with a gloved finger. "Wet?" Thomas Reed stepped closer. "Condensation." "Not unless condensation grows needles." Bell opened the fold. 3 small pine needles clung to the damp fabric. They were dark green, flattened and freshly broken. Rowan looked through the window at the nearest trees, which stood at least 30 yards away. "Someone brought those inside." Reed took one of the needles with tweezers. "Mountain pine." I said, "We are on a mountain surrounded by pines. That narrows it to everyone." "No." Reed held it beneath the desk lamp. "These are from the trees on the north slope." Shorter needles, silver underneath. They grow where the wind cuts hardest. Grace folded her arms. Are we now investigating trees? We are investigating how wet needles reached a curtain in a locked room, Belle said. Peter looked almost relieved. The figure opened the window. The latches were fastened inside, Rowan replied. Then the killer fastened them afterward. From outside? Peter had no answer. Belle examined the wall beside the window. The cedar paneling appeared solid, but one narrow board was less faded than those around it. He pressed along its edge. Nothing moved. Thomas Reed watched him. Belle turned. You know something. Reed's face remained blank. You looked at that panel before I touched it. I look after the building. You looked afraid. Daniel Crowe said, Reed has been afraid since the body was found. Reed ignored him. Belle pointed at the panel. What is behind it? Stone. According to the lodge plan, that wall is 4 feet thick. The original owners built heavily. 4 feet is not heavy. It is hollow. Reed's jaw tightened. Rowan stepped closer. Mr. Reed, if there is another space inside this lodge, now would be an excellent time to mention it. For several seconds, the only movement came from the false flames in the hall. Then Reed said, There is a service passage. Peter stared at him. What service passage? It runs between parts of the outer wall. Blackridge was built as a hunting lodge before the west wing was added. Servants used the passage to tend the stoves, carry wood, and reach the rooms without crossing the main hall. Grace said. Harold never mentioned it. Mr. Mercer knew. Belle's voice hardened. You told us the ventilation shaft was too narrow for a man. It is, but you did not tell us it connects with a passage. I said the shaft was sealed. That was not the question. Reed looked toward the wet curtain. The passage was sealed 20 years ago. Why? A muscle moved in his cheek. A worker disappeared inside it. No one spoke for a moment. Rowan said, disappeared. His name was Jacob Hale. He was repairing pipes during the winter renovation. One evening he entered the passage near the kitchen and never came out. Was his body found? No. Was the passage searched? For 3 days. The sheriff found his tools near the north wall and blood on one beam. The passage narrows where the old lodge joins the new wing. They believed he fell into a shaft or found another way out. And then, the owner ordered every entrance sealed. I looked at the clean section of paneling. How many entrances? 5. Kitchen, cellar, study, upstairs linen room, and the chamber behind the fireplace. That earned everyone's attention. Belle said, the chamber containing the substitute projection system? Reed nodded. Who knew the passage still existed? Mercer, me, and anyone who studied the original plans. Emily looked toward Peter. The plans were stored in the workshop archive. Peter shook his head. I never saw them. Crow's cigar shifted between his fingers. Harold showed them to me years ago. Rowan turned. Why? He wanted to expand the lodge. Did he show you the passage entrances? I do not remember. That means yes, Grace said. Crow gave her a cold glance. You financed the renovation. You must have seen the plans too. I saw budgets, not walls. Belle returned to the narrow cedar board and examined the floor beneath it. A faint line of dirt followed the baseboard. Halfway along it, the dust had been disturbed by a small curved mark. The missing iron lifting tool had a hooked. Belle inserted a similar tool supplied by Reed and pulled. The panel moved outward less than an inch. Cold air entered the study. Peter stepped back, together. Belle and Reed drew the concealed door open. Behind it was darkness and the odor of wet stone, old timber, and pine. Rowan aimed a flashlight inside. The passage was barely wide enough for a man to turn sideways. Rough beams divided sections of ancient masonry. New electrical cable had been fastened along one wall. Beneath it ran the clear optical fiber connected to the fireplace camera. The floor was damp. Fresh pine needles lay across it. Peter whispered, "That is where the figure went." Belle entered first. I followed, because Wolfe had never considered my comfort a useful factor in an investigation. The passage turned behind the study windows. Narrow openings had once allowed servants to inspect shutters and stove vents. Through one opening, covered only by dark glass, we could see into Mercer's study. From the upper landing, anyone standing inside the passage would have appeared to be outside the window. Peter had seen a figure. He had merely been wrong about which side of the wall it occupied. 10 feet farther on, Belle stopped. The dust showed prints from narrow shoes. The impressions came from the direction of the fireplace, paused behind the study, and continued upward along a wooden stair, hidden inside the wall, caught. On a splinter beside the stair was a thread of pale fabric. Grace Nolan wore a pale wool scarf. Emily noticed it at the same moment I did. Grace remained outside the opening, but her face changed. Belle removed the thread with tweezers. "This may belong to anyone," Grace said. "It resembles my scarf." Daniel Crowe gave a humorless smile. "How helpful of you. I lost it yesterday afternoon." "Where?" "Near the north terrace." Thomas Reed looked at her. "The terrace overlooks the sealed cellar entrance." Rowan asked, "Why were you there?" Grace's composure slipped for the first time. "Mercer asked me to meet him." "What did he show you?" "Nothing." "What did he tell you?" "That the stolen design had not been sold for money alone." Belle stepped out of the passage. What else was exchanged? Grace looked toward the artificial fire. "Ownership of Blackridge Retreat." The statement settled over the room. Mercer's invention, the hidden camera, the missing recording, and the locked study had all appeared to concern industrial theft. Now the lodge itself had entered the bargain. From inside the passage came a soft scraping noise. Rowan raised his flashlight. "Is someone there?" No answer. The scraping came again, farther up the hidden stair. Bell entered with his pistol drawn. I went behind him, while Rowan ordered everyone else to stay where they were. The passage climbed toward the workshop. At the top, we found a small landing and another sealed panel. The dust before it was disturbed. Someone had passed through recently. Bell put his ear against the wood. On the other side, something clicked 47 seconds apart, the false fire's timing mechanism. He opened the panel. We stepped into a narrow chamber behind Mercer's workshop archive. On a shelf stood the missing iron tool, the stolen study key, and the metal cylinder seen in the fireplace recording. The cylinder was empty. Beside it lay a photograph taken by Mercer's hidden camera. It showed a figure entering the study passage at 9:46. The face had been cut away, but the figure's hand was clearly visible. It held a square silver watch. By its broken strap, Emily had not worn the watch inside the passage. Someone had carried it there to place her name in the fire. Portable telephone rang. Wolfe spoke before I could greet him. "Archie, have you found the person outside the window?" "Not outside. Between the walls." "Indeed. You sound disappointed." "No. I am annoyed that the building is more devious than its occupants." I told him about the passage, the pine needles, Grace's thread, the missing tool, and the photograph with its face removed. Wolfe grunted. "The murderer has supplied evidence against Miss Carter, Miss Nolan, and young Mr. Mercer. You think Peter's story was planted too?" "I think a murderer who creates 3 suspects does not fear suspicion. He fears identification from the missing recording. Not only the recording, find out who ordered the passage sealed 20 years ago. Why? Because a worker who disappears inside a wall may remain useful to someone who needs a dead man to enter a locked room." The line went silent. Behind us, the artificial flames completed another perfect repetition. This time, during the 44th second, the dark shape behind the logs raised its hand. Now that we had found the passage, we could see what the hand was doing. It was not placing the hidden projector. It was opening the metal holder where Mercer had concealed his evidence, and on one finger was a ring shaped like a black pine. Chapter 5, The Sound. Beneath the floor at Blackridge Retreat, sleep was offered as a theory rather than a service. The wind kept scraping pine branches against the roof. The old walls complained whenever the temperature fell, and the false fire continued its 47-second performance in the hall below. I had been given a room across from Arthur Bell, with a mattress designed by someone who distrusted comfort. At 12 minutes past 2, Bell knocked on my door. He was fully dressed and carrying a flashlight. "Do you hear it?" I listened. 4 slow taps came from somewhere beneath us. Tap, 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 tap. Silence followed. Then the pattern repeated. "Pipes?" I asked. "The heating system is off." "Branches?" "No tree reaches this side of the lodge." The sound came again, measured and patient. Bell crouched and placed his palm against the floor. The 4th tap was slightly louder than the others. "It is below my room," he said. "Emily Carter taps her fingers in groups of 4. I noticed. So did anyone who wanted us to notice. Bell stood. "Get your shoes." I told him I had intended to investigate barefoot, but he had already entered the corridor. The tapping stopped when we reached the stairs. The lodge was dark except for small oil lamps placed along the walls. Inspector Rowan had ordered the portable generator shut down during the night to preserve fuel. The hearth ghost should therefore have been dead. It was not. Orange flames turned behind the grate in the main hall, bending around the artificial logs without sound or heat. The room was empty, but the fire looked occupied. Bell checked his watch. 47 seconds passed. The sequence began again. Then came 4 faint taps beneath the floor. Bell moved across the rug, stopping beside the place where Mercer's body had been found. He lowered himself and pressed an ear to the boards. The sound repeated directly beneath him. "It is not in the wall passage," he said. "It is under the hall." Thomas Reed had told us the original hunting lodge possessed a narrow crawl space between the stone foundation and the timber floor. Most of it had supposedly been filled during renovation. At Blackridge, sealed, empty, and unused had become words requiring police supervision. Bell ran the flashlight beam along the floorboards. The wood was old oak, darkened by age and wax. Near the left corner of the hearth, one board showed a thin, pale line along its edge. It had been lifted recently. Bell fetched Inspector Rowan before touching it. Rowan arrived in a coat over his nightclothes, carrying his pistol and the expression of a man who had begun to resent architecture personally. Emily Carter came behind him. "I heard footsteps," she said. "Did you hear tapping?" Rowan asked. "No." Bell glanced at her fingers. They were still. Thomas Reed brought tools and knelt beside the loose board. "This section was fixed last autumn." "By whom?" Rowan asked. "Peter helped me replace damaged flooring. Peter Mercer appeared on the staircase as though his name had pulled him from bed. I carried boards. I did not install them. Grace Nolan and Daniel Crow followed." Within 3 minutes, everyone in the lodge had gathered around the floor, proving that secrecy attracts a crowd faster than entertainment. Reed inserted a narrow iron blade into the seam and lifted. The board rose easily. Cold air came through the opening, carrying the smell of damp earth and heated metal. Beneath the floor ran several old pipes, a newer electrical cable, and a thin wire wrapped in black cloth. He knelt beside it. "That cable belongs to the simulator." Bell aimed the light. Deeper, the wire crossed beneath the hearth and ended at a small metal switch fastened to the underside of the floor. A spring-loaded arm touched the board above it. Each time the mechanism moved, it struck the timber. 4 contacts had been arranged in a row. Tap, 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 tap. Rowan said, "A signal?" "A mechanical warning," Emily replied. "Or a count." Bell put on gloves and reached into the opening. The metal casing came loose after Reed removed 2 screws. One side was stained dark red. Blood. Peter stepped backward. Rowan held the switch beneath the lamp. The blood had dried inside the joint and along the narrow control lever. A single short hair clung to the edge. "Human?" Grace asked. Rowan looked at her. "I left my laboratory in my other coat." Emily examined the terminals without touching them. "This is not merely a switch." "What does it control?" Bell asked. "The fire sequence, certainly. This line enters the substitute projector. But the second circuit runs west." "To Mercer's study," I said. She nodded. Reed opened the lodge plan on the floor. The cable followed the foundation, beneath the library, and turned toward the study wall. "There's no electrical system in the study door," he said. Emily pointed to a symbol marked beside the secondary control. "There is now." We crossed the hall and found the study door closed. The police seal remained unbroken. Rowan removed it and used the key. The key turned, but the door did not open. Something inside the frame held it. Emily removed the iron plate around the lock. Behind it was a compact magnetic bolt hidden inside newly cut wood. Peter stared at it. "My uncle never told me about that. He did not tell anyone about anything useful." Crow said. Emily traced the thin control wire downward. "The ordinary key operates the visible lock. The magnetic bolt works separately. Someone could leave the key inside, close the door, and lock the hidden bolt from beneath the fireplace room floor." Bell looked toward the hall, a locked room created from another room. Rowan tested the switch through the open floorboard. When he pressed the first contact, the study bolt released with a soft click. The Second contact dimmed the artificial fire. The third restarted the 47-second loop. The fourth produced the blue points that had appeared after the murder. 4. Taps 4 functions. Emily looked at the device. Someone was testing it beneath us. Tonight? Peter asked. Bell shook his head. The blood has dried around the lever. The contacts are damaged. Cooling metal caused the arm to contract, striking the board as the temperature dropped. The tapping was accidental, Grace asked. The sound was accidental, Bell said. The 4-part mechanism was not. Rowan carried the switch back to the hall and placed it in an evidence bag. If the killer operated this device, Mercer's study could have been locked while empty. No one had to escape through the window. No, I said. But someone still used the passage. The wet pine needles, the stolen watch, and the missing recording had already proved that. Bell directed his light into the floor opening again. The cable had been fastened with new brass clips. One clip was missing. Beside the empty screw hole lay a small black object. He lifted it with tweezers. It was the stone from a ring, carved. Into its surface was a pine tree, the same design we had seen on the hand reaching into the hidden compartment during the recorded flame loop. Thomas Reed stared at it. Rowan, noticed? You recognize this? Reed said nothing. Bell rose slowly. 20 years ago, when Jacob Hale disappeared inside the service passage, what was he wearing? Reed's face had gone grey. A workers' society ring, he said. Black stone. Pine tree seal. Peter looked from the ring to the dark opening under the floor. Then this belonged to the missing man. No, Reed replied. His voice was barely above a whisper. Jacob's ring was found in his room after he vanished. The false fire changed behind us. The orange flames lowered, and the blue light returned beneath the center log. 4 points appeared, one after another. This time they did not vanish. They moved upward across the stone backing, forming the outline of a hand. A dark line marked the wrist, the same place where Mercer had been burned. My telephone rang before anyone spoke. Wolfe's voice came over it. Archie, what has happened? Bell found a switch under the floor. It controlled the fire and an electronic bolt in the study door. It has blood on it. Whose blood? Rowan has not yet asked it politely. And the tapping. 4 contacts. 4 functions, indeed. What else? I told him about the black pine stone and Jacob Hale's missing ring. Wolfe made a dissatisfied sound. A ring found twice is not an identity. It is a message from the murderer, from someone who expects you to think about a dead worker instead of a living killer. Across the room, Thomas Reed was still staring into the open floor. Bell asked him when he had last seen Jacob Hale. Reed did not answer immediately. When he finally did, he looked not at Bell, but at the hidden passage behind the fireplace. The night he disappeared, Reed said. Jacob told me he had found a room beneath the lodge. Bell's eyes narrowed. What room? One that does not appear on any plan. Beneath us, something struck the foundation, not 4 times, once, hard enough to shake dust from the floorboards. Chapter 6. The guest who changed her story. A witness who changes her story usually has one of 3 reasons. She has remembered something, forgotten something, or decided that the truth is less dangerous than the lie. Grace Nolan belonged to the 3rd group. Inspector Rowan assembled everyone in the library shortly after breakfast. The storm had weakened, but the road remained buried. The telephone line worked only when it felt sociable, and the false fire in the hall continued burning through another perfect 47-second loop. Grace sat at the end of the long table with both hands folded before her. Daniel Crowe stood near the cold stove, holding his usual unlit cigar. Emily Carter occupied a chair near the door. Peter Mercer leaned against a bookcase. Thomas Reed remained apart from them, still troubled by the single blow that had sounded beneath the floor during the night. Bell placed Rowan's notebook on the table. Miss Nolan, you told Inspector Rowan that you remained in the dining room from 8:40 until Mercer's body was discovered. I did. Daniel turned his cigar between his fingers. No. You did not. Grace looked at him. Be careful. I am being careful. At approximately 9:35 I saw you near the study corridor. You are mistaken. I was leaving the billiard room. You came from the western hall. I came from the dining room. The dining room is east of the stairs. Grace's expression did not alter, but one of her hands closed over the other. Rowan said. Mr. Crow, why did you not mention this earlier? Because I assumed she had already told you. Bell said. You heard her give her statement yesterday. Daniel shrugged. I was more interested in the fact that Harold was dead. That interest has been uneven, I said. He gave me a hard look but did not improve it with words. Rowan turned back to Grace. Were you near Mercer's study? No. Then Crow is lying. Yes. Daniel laughed once. You were standing beside the library door with something in your hand. What? A folder or envelope. Grace's face tightened. Bell leaned forward. The proof envelope missing from Mercer's safe. I never entered the workshop. That was not the question. She rose. I will not be accused on the word of a man who spent 20 years stealing from Harold and calling it partnership. Daniel stepped away from the stove. Sit down. Grace, do not order me. I saw you. And I saw you come in from outside with snow on your coat less than an hour before Harold died. The room paused. Bell's eyes moved to Daniel. When was this? Around 9, Daniel said. I checked the generator. Thomas Reed frowned. I had already checked it. You complained that the current was unstable. I said the north line was icing. The generator was running correctly. Daniel's cigar stopped moving. I wanted to see for myself. You know nothing about engines. I know enough to recognize whether one is running. Grace turned to Rowan. He returned through the side entrance. His coat was wet, and pine needles were caught along the shoulder. Bell looked toward the evidence box containing the needles taken from Mercer's curtain. Inspector, we should examine Mr. Crow's coat. Daniel's expression became contemptuous. You already searched our rooms. We did not know then that the needles mattered. My coat is in the front closet. A deputy fetched it. The coat was heavy black wool with a wide collar. At first it appeared clean. Then Bell turned the right sleeve inside out and found 2 short pine needles caught beneath the cuff. Thomas Reed examined them beneath a magnifying lens. North slope, pine, the same variety found wet on the study. Curtain. Grace sat down again. Daniel said, As I told you, I went outside. Through which door? Rowan asked. The north service entrance. That door opens near the generator shed, Reed said, but the nearest north slope trees are beyond the old terrace. I walked farther. Why? To inspect the power line. In darkness? During a storm? Daniel's patience broke. Yes, during a storm. Harold had spent the entire evening accusing us of theft. I wanted 5 minutes away from him. Bell said, Did you enter the sealed cellar passage? No. Did you approach the study from inside the wall? No. Did you take Emily Carter's watch? No. Did you remove Mercer's recording? No. His answers came smoothly until the last one, which came a little faster. Rowan noticed. So you know a recording was removed. Everyone knows. You have discussed nothing else since morning. Bell walked to the library window. Outside, the snow covered the terrace in a broad white slope. The old cellar entrance lay beneath it, sealed behind stonework and timber. Wet pine needles were found inside Mercer's study, Bell said. The exterior snow beneath the windows was untouched. Therefore, the needles entered through the wall passage. The passage connects with the cellar entrance near the north slope trees. Daniel's jaw tightened. That proves someone used it. Not me. It proves your coat visited the same trees. I visited the generator. Reed shook his head. The generator shed is surrounded by firs, not pines. That left Daniel with less room. Grace watched him with something close to satisfaction. Bell saw it and turned back to her. Mr. Crow's trouble does not improve your story. Her satisfaction vanished. You were near the study. Corridor. I have said I was not. You also told us Mercer asked you to meet him near the north. Terrace, that was earlier. When? Before dinner. What did he want? I told you. He said the theft involved ownership of the lodge. Bell waited. Grace looked from him to Rowan. Her composure held for another few seconds, then weakened around the eyes. I did not kill Harold. That is useful only if true. Rowan said. She opened the handbag beside her chair and removed a small key. Peter stared at. She said, That is Uncle's private cabinet key. Grace placed it on the table. Harold gave it to me yesterday afternoon. Why? Bell asked. He wanted me to retrieve a file from the study. Which file? My investment records. No one interrupted her. Grace continued reluctantly. 3 years ago, when the Hearth Ghost project began, I raised capital through several private accounts. Some of the investors did not know their funds were being transferred into Mercer's company. Daniel said, "You forged authorization." She looked at him. "I altered. Dates and account descriptions you stole. I intended to repay everything when the licensing agreement was signed." "That is what thieves say when profit is late," Rowan placed a hand on the table. "How much?" "Nearly $600,000. Peter gave a low whistle. Grace's eyes stayed on Rowan. "Harold discovered the records last month. He threatened to send them to the state investigators unless I transferred my share of Blackridge Retreat to him." "The lodge belongs partly to you?" I asked. 40%. "Harold used my money to finish the West Wing and rebuild the projection chamber. The deed was held through a private company." Bell said, "So when Mercer said ownership of Blackridge had been exchanged, he meant your share?" "Yes." "Did you agree?" "I signed a transfer yesterday afternoon, and afterward he still threatened you." "He said the transfer protected him, not me." Daniel gave another short laugh. "That sounds like Harold." Grace ignored him. "At 9:30 I went to the study corridor because he had promised to return the false records. He did not appear. The study door was locked. What was in your hand?" Rowan asked. "The transfer agreement. Where is it now?" "I burned it." Emily looked up sharply. "In Mercer's study?" "No, in the dining room grate." Bell studied her. "The dining room grate has not been used for 2 days." Grace's mouth opened and closed. I said, "The wastebasket in Mercer's locked study contained a burned paper marked Control Sequence 9. Perhaps you burned more than one document." Her face changed. "I entered the study before dinner using the key Harold gave me. I found my file in the cabinet and took it. Then why return at 9:30? Because the file was incomplete. The pages proving Harold's part were missing." "What part?" "He had approved the transfers." "He planned to accuse me of acting alone," Bell said. "You lied because admitting you entered the study gave you motive, opportunity, and access to the hidden control." "Yes, but you left before dinner." "Yes." "Did you know about the wall passage?" "No." "Did you see the secondary fire control?" "No, the panel was closed." "Did you touch the curtain?" Grace frowned. "I looked outside when I heard someone moving near the wall." "Inside or outside?" "I thought outside." "The sound came from behind the curtain. What time?" "About 5. Bell and Rowan exchanged a glance. "That was hours before Mercer's death, but after the hidden system might have been prepared." "Did you open the window?" "No." "Did you see pine needles?" "No." Bell turned to Daniel. "The needles on your coat match those on the curtain." "Miss Nolan entered the study before dinner and heard movement in the wall. You went outside near the entrance to the hidden passage." Daniel's voice was flat. "Coincidence." Wolfe had once informed me that coincidence is a word people use when they have encountered a fact before, preparing an explanation for it. Bell said, "Show us the route you took to the generator." Daniel refused at first, then changed his mind when Rowan mentioned arrest. We put on coats and followed him through the north service door. The wind had softened, but cold still cut across the terrace. Daniel led us to the generator shed, then along a narrow path toward the power line. Thomas Reed stopped after 20 yards. "This is not where you walked yesterday." "How would you know?" "The storm covered the ground, but the branches, remember. Several low fir limbs had been pushed aside recently. Daniel's route passed beneath them. Yet no fir needles had been found on his coat." Bell pointed toward the higher slope. "The pine needles came from there." Daniel said nothing. We climbed until we reached the line of short mountain pines. Beyond them, half hidden beneath snow and brush, stood a stone arch sealed with rotting boards. The old cellar entrance. One board had been replaced recently. Its nails were bright. Bell brushed snow from the threshold. Caught beneath the new board was a strip of black wool matching Daniel's coat. Rowan faced him. "You entered here." Daniel looked at the arch, then at Grace. "Yes." "Why?" "Mercer instructed me to. That surprised everyone except perhaps Wolfe, who was safely in New York and therefore had the unfair advantage of distance." "When?" Bell asked. "Yesterday afternoon. Harold showed me the entrance and told me to inspect the old passage." "For what?" "A metal case hidden beneath the lodge. The room Jacob Hale discovered?" Daniel nodded. He said the case contained original ownership papers and records concerning the first construction of Blackridge. "Did you find it?" "No. Did you enter the study passage?" I reached a fork. One branch climbed toward the study, but I did not take it. Why conceal this? Because Mercer was murdered through that passage. Bell pointed to the wool caught under the board. You went inside wearing the coat. That explains the needles. It does not explain how they reached the study curtain. Daniel looked toward the lodge. I was not alone in the passage. The wind moved through the pines above us. Who was with you? Rowan asked. I never saw the person. I heard someone ahead of me. 4 steps, then silence. 4 more steps, then silence. The same 4-count rhythm as the switch beneath the floor, Daniel continued. I called out. The person ran toward the lodge. When I reached the fork, I found this. He reached inside his coat and produced a small brass disc. One side carried the black pine tree seal. The other bore 4 engraved numbers. 471. Emily took a step forward. That is an archive command. What does it open? Belle asked. Her face had gone pale. Not the fire program. She looked toward Blackridge Retreat. It opens the camera's original recording, the part that was hidden before the 47-second loop began. Daniel had lied about the passage. Grace had lied about the study. Both had reasons to fear Mercer, and each had concealed evidence, but only one of them possessed the command that could restore the missing hour. Bell held out his hand. Daniel did not give him the disc. Instead, he closed his fist around it. From inside the sealed passage came 4 slow knocks, then a 5th. Thomas. Reed backed away from the entrance. That was not the switch, he whispered. Bell drew his pistol. No, he said. Someone is still inside. Chapter 7. The missing 47 seconds, the fuse. 5th knock from inside the sealed passage was followed by silence. Arthur Bell stood before the rotting boards with his pistol raised. Inspector Rowan ordered Daniel Crowe away from the entrance, while Thomas Reed brought a crowbar from the generator shed. If someone is inside, Grace Nolan said, we should open it. If someone is inside, Bell replied. He has had 20 years to learn patience. Reed tore the first board loose. Cold, stale air escaped from the darkness beyond it. The passage smelled of wet stone, rust, and the old pine needles that had already caused more lying than most bank accounts. Bell entered first. Rowan followed, then Reed and I. Daniel remained under guard outside with the brass disc in Rowan's evidence bag. The passage descended between rough stone walls. Our lights found fresh marks in the dust, but no person. At the fork Daniel had described, 4 footprints led toward the lodge and stopped abruptly beside a drainage channel. The 5th knock had come from a loose pipe striking the wall. Someone had pulled a cord tied to it and escaped before we opened the entrance. Bell found the cut end of the cord near the floor. A diversion, Rowan said, or a warning, I replied. To whom? The person carrying the archive command. We returned to the lodge, where Emily Carter had already taken possession of the brass disc under Rowan's supervision. The engraved numbers 9471 matched an emergency. Access command hidden in Mercer's archive. System. Emily carried the control unit into the hall and set it on a table facing the fireplace. Mercer designed the archive to preserve every demonstration, she said. Even deleted recordings leave fragments in a reserve memory. This command should unlock them. Should? Rowan asked. Harold enjoyed making certainty expensive. She connected the archive to a portable battery. The screen came alive, displaying rows of time codes and corrupted files. The recording of Mercer's final hour appeared at the bottom. 9:15 to 10:15. Emily entered the 4 numbers. The screen went black. Then a new file appeared beneath, the old one. Reserve sequence. 47 seconds, Peter. Mercer leaned over the table. That is the missing section. No, Emily said. That is the section used to cover it. She opened the file. The image showed the hall from the camera hidden in the fireplace stone. The artificial flames occupied the lower half of the frame. Beyond them, chairs, windows, and the lower staircase remained visible. The sequence began with an empty room. At 12 seconds, the left flame bent toward the center. At 26, a spark rose behind the second log. At 44, the dark hand appeared inside the hidden compartment, wearing Emily's square watch backward. At 47, the image restarted. Bell said, "We have seen this." "Yes, but now we know when it was inserted." Emily opened the damaged main recording and enlarged the time. Display. The normal image continued until 9:46 and 13 seconds, then the 47-second. Loop began. It repeated until 10 o'clock and 31 seconds. That is not one missing section, Rowan said. No, Emily replied. The same 47 seconds were copied over 14 minutes. Grace looked toward the falsifier. Then the murder happened during those 14 minutes. Most likely. Bell stood beside the screen, watching the final genuine seconds before the replacement began. Mercer entered the hall from the library at 9:45. He held a folded paper in his left hand and looked toward the staircase. He crossed to the hearth and bent beside the artificial logs. At 9:46 and 5 seconds, he placed something inside the hidden metal holder, the proof envelope. At 9:46 and 9 seconds, he straightened. Then he turned toward the wall beside the fireplace, not toward the main hall, not toward the staircase, toward the concealed passage entrance. His expression changed. It was not surprise. He had expected someone. Mercer spoke, though the recording carried no sound. His lips formed 3 or 4 words. Emily froze the image. Peter stared at his uncle's face. What did he say? Bell watched the movement twice. Come in. Perhaps I shook my head. Too many mouth movements, Grace said. He may have said a name. Daniel Crowe stood under guard near the doors. Can you read it? No, Bell said. But Mercer was not afraid. The final genuine frame showed the hidden panel beginning to move inward. A thin line of darkness appeared beside the stone fireplace. Then the recording vanished into the repeating flames. Emily advanced through each copied loop, searching for any remaining fragment of the original image. Most frames were perfectly identical. At the 7th repetition, a pale distortion appeared near the study corridor. At the 10th, the top of the screen flickered. At the 17th, a shadow crossed the windows, although no one was visible in the room. The replacement is incomplete, she said. The fire image covered the center of the recording, but signals from the outer part of the camera survived underneath it. Bell leaned over her shoulder. Can you separate them? I can try. For 20 minutes, she adjusted contrast, removed the repeated flame frames and reconstructed the fragments beneath them. The picture broke into gray blocks, lines, and sudden flashes of the empty hall. At 9:48, something moved behind the wall opening. At 9:51, the secondary fire controls activated. At 9:53, the electronic bolt inside Mercer's study door received a locking signal. Rowan pointed at the time. The switch beneath the floor. Emily nodded. First contact, study bolt. Second contact, substitute projector. Third, loop control. And the fourth? Bell asked. The message sequence. The murderer had not merely killed Mercer and left. Someone had operated the 4-part switch in order, locking the empty study, replacing the real recording, and preparing the later messages in the flames. Peter said, "Why lock the study if Uncle was killed in the hall?" "To make us believe the missing evidence had been taken from a room no one entered," I said. The locked study was part of the performance, Bell nodded, and to direct attention away from the wall passage. We were supposed to argue over windows, keys, and footprints. Emily restored another damaged frame. At 9:55, Mercer appeared. He was already on the floor beside the hearth. His right hand lay near the grate. His left arm was trapped beneath him. The room appeared empty. Rowan moved closer to the screen. There should be blood. The image is poor, Emily said. Bell studied Mercer's position. He was moved. How can you tell? Peter asked. When Mercer turned toward the passage, he stood to the left of the fireplace. His body was found on the right. The killer carried or dragged him across the hearth. Rowan looked at the thin burn mark visible in the medical photograph, the optical fiber around his wrist. A loop, Bell said. Used to pull his arm or hold him while the blow was delivered. The examiner said the head wound did not kill him. No, I said. The blood on the switch may tell us what did. Emily looked up. What do you mean? The switch was beneath the floor near Mercer's body. If Mercer's blood reached it, either he was wounded above it or the killer carried blood down into the mechanism. Bell opened Rowan's medical file. The laboratory report arrived this morning. The stain on the switch belongs to Mercer. Rowan turned sharply. You did not mention that. I received it while we were outside. Bell read further. The burn on Mercer's wrist contained copper residue and a trace of conductive gel. Emily's expression changed. That gel is used on pulse sensors. A sensor? Peter asked. The simulator could adjust its rhythm to a viewer's heartbeat during private demonstrations. Mercer developed it to make the flames feel alive. Bell looked at Mercer's body on the screen. The fiber around his wrist was not only a restraint, it measured his pulse. Rowan understood. The killer knew when he died, and the switch used that signal to begin the replacement loop, Emily said. The recording changed automatically when Mercer's heartbeat stopped. The room became very quiet. The murder had been connected to the fire at the precise instant of death. Not afterward, not by guesswork. System had waited for Mercer's heart to cease, and then covered the evidence. Emily resumed the reconstruction. Frame remained between Mercer, turning toward the wall, and the beginning of the false loop. It was badly damaged, but a narrow reflection survived in the glass of the drinks cabinet. A figure stood behind. Mercer. The face was invisible. The right arm was raised. On the hand was the black pine tree ring. Thomas Reed whispered, "Jacob Hale." Bell shook his head. The ring was in Jacob's room 20 years ago. The person wearing it now is using his disappearance as a mask. He enlarged the reflection. The figure's coat was dark. Its shoulders appeared broad, but distortion made size unreliable. Near the left hip hung a loop of keys. Peter looked at Thomas Reed. The caretaker wore a heavy key ring at his belt. Reed saw everyone looking. "Half the lodge keys are mine," Daniel Crow said. "And you knew every passage." "I did not kill him. You knew where Jacob vanished." "I said I did not kill Mercer." Bell's gaze stayed on the screen. At 9:53, the study door was locked electronically. At 9:55, Mercer's body appeared beside the fire, but the room was empty. Peter said the killer went back through the wall. "No," Bell replied. "Look at the study corridor." Emily restored the pale distortion that had appeared there. A door moved, not the study door, the library. Door someone had crossed from the fireplace, room into the library during the loop, and then used the interior. Connection to reach the study corridor. Unseen. The false recording did more than conceal. Movement in the hall, Bell said. It concealed movement throughout the ground floor. Anyone could appear to remain in one room while crossing another. Gray stared at Daniel. "You said you saw me near the study corridor." "I did. During the missing 14 minutes. Daniel said nothing. Bell checked the time from Daniel's earlier statement. 9:35 before the loop began. Grace had lied. But Daniel had not invented that sighting. Emily isolated the final recovered fragment. At 10 o'clock and 29 seconds, just before the normal recording returned, a hand reached toward the fireplace camera. It removed something from beside the lens, a small microphone. The recording had sound. Emily said. Rowan's jaw tightened. "Then why did we hear nothing?" "Because the audio file was separated and taken." Bell looked toward the hidden passage. The killer was not afraid of being seen. The loop handled that. The killer was afraid of being heard. Mercer's last words had named someone or revealed something important enough to justify removing the entire audio unit. My telephone rang. Wolfe had chosen his moment well. Summarized the recovered sequence: Mercer's pulse sensor, the automatic loop, the electronic study lock, and the missing microphone. Wolfe made a low, dissatisfied sound. The murderer designed the concealment before the gathering? Yes. And expected Mercer to stand near the fire? Yes. And knew he would admit someone through the passage? Yes. Then Mercer arranged the meeting. That is what Bell thinks. No, Mr. Bell has observed it. Thinking comes next. I looked at the suspects. Mercer expected the killer but did not expect to be killed, plainly. What did he hold in his left hand? A folded paper. Where is it? I looked at Rowan. He checked the evidence list. No folded paper had been found on Mercer's body. Missing, I said. Find it. The proof envelope was bait. The paper was the reason for the meeting. The line went dead. Bell had been close enough to hear. He returned to the restored image and enlarged Mercer's left hand. A corner of the folded paper showed a printed emblem, a black pine tree above 4 numbers, the same emblem as the ring and the brass archive disc. Thomas Reed stared at it. That is not a workers' society mark. What is it? Rowan asked. Reed looked toward the sealed passage. It is the original seal of Blackridge Retreat. The missing 47 seconds had concealed a murder, the missing paper. However, connected that murder to the lodge itself, and to whatever Jacob Hale had discovered beneath it 20 years earlier. Chapter 8. The Passage Behind the Flames by Noon. The artificial fire had become less a fireplace than a witness refusing to finish its sentence. Bell stood before it with Thomas Reed, studying the iron frame that held the imitation logs. Emily Carter had shut down every known circuit, yet a faint orange glow still moved behind the blackened glass. Inspector Rowan ordered the suspects into the library. He left 2 deputies in the hall and remained beside Bell, while Reed removed the bolts around the grate. I called Wolfe before they began. "We are taking the fire apart," I told him. "Mr. Bell is taking it apart. You are reporting the destruction. I may hold something. Resist the impulse." The imitation logs were heavier than they looked. Each contained lenses, vapor channels, and bundles of optical fiber. Bell and Reed lifted the frame together and placed it on the rug. Behind it, where solid stone should have been, appeared a narrow black opening. Cold air flowed from it. The old service passage ran directly behind the flames. "So Mercer could admit someone without crossing the hall," Rowan said. Bell aimed his flashlight inside. "And the killer could leave," while the repeated recording showed an empty room. The opening was less than 2 feet wide. A person entering had to turn sideways and step over the hidden projector. Fresh scratches marked the stone near shoulder height. Bell entered first. I followed after reminding myself that Wolfe was probably sitting beside a comfortable fire that produced actual heat. The passage descended 6 steps and widened behind the chimney. New wire had been fastened along the old beams. Part of it connected to the blood-stained switch beneath the hall floor. Another line climbed toward the hidden camera. 10 feet inside, Bell found a pair of leather gloves beneath a loose stone. They were large, black and wet along the fingertips. Daniel Crow's initials were stamped inside one cuff. Rowan examined them. "After we carried them into the light, Mr. Crow denied entering this branch of the passage. He has denied several things in useful order," Bell said. One glove had a narrow tear across the palm. A bright copper strand was caught in the leather. Emily examined it. The wire around Mercer's wrist contained copper. Daniel was brought from the library. He looked at the gloves but did not touch them. "They are mine." "Where did you last see them?" Rowan asked. "In my coat pocket yesterday afternoon." "The same coat you wore into the cellar passage?" "Yes. Did you bring them this far?" "No." Bell held up the torn glove. "Someone did." Daniel's face remained hard. "Then someone stole them." Peter gave a short, bitter laugh from the doorway. "That is convenient." Daniel turned. "You have found convenience useful yourself." Bell went back into the passage. This time Rowan followed him, while I remained close enough to hear without becoming permanently part of the building. Beyond the place where the gloves had been hidden, the passage divided. One branch led upward toward Mercer's study. The other narrowed beneath the workshop. Inside the second branch, Bell found a coil of insulated wire, a cutting tool, and a package wrapped in waterproof cloth. Emily opened the package under Rowan's supervision. Inside were the stolen Hearth ghost design files. The drawings contained Mercer's notes, Emily's source codes, lens specifications, and the incomplete thermal control, design sold to Arclight Systems. Grace Nolan stared at. "Daniel, you said you found no case in the passage." "Found none. But you found—" "These." Daniel said nothing. Rowan placed the files in an evidence box. "These were wrapped against damp and hidden. Inside the route you used. I did not put them there. Your gloves were beside them." "My gloves were planted," Bell said, "perhaps. But the files were not placed here after Mercer's death. The dust beneath the package is dry, and the surrounding stone is damp. They have been here for days." Emily inspected the first page. "These are the originals. Mercer believed the stolen copies had come from the workshop, but someone removed the physical file itself." Daniel looked at her. "You already knew they were gone. I knew the archive had been copied. You told Mercer?" "Yes, when?" 3 weeks ago." Daniel's expression changed slightly. It was small, but Bell noticed. "You did not know that," he said. "I knew Harold suspected theft. You did not know Miss Carter had warned him 3 weeks earlier." Daniel folded his arms. "What difference does it make?" "It tells us your information came from Mercer's accusation yesterday." "Not from the original theft. That weakened the idea that Daniel had stolen the designs, but it did not explain his gloves, his lies, or his trip into the passage. Bell returned to the narrow branch beneath the workshop and searched the floor inch by inch. He found the watch near a rotting beam. It had a round steel face and a cracked leather strap. The glass was shattered, and both hands had stopped at 9:49. Peter Mercer looked at it and went pale. Chapter 10. The cold fire. Explained Inspector Rowan gathered them before the dismantled hearth at 6 that evening. The road remained blocked, so Wolfe conducted the gathering from West 35th Street through a telephone placed on the mantel. He disliked telephones, mountains, and murderers who depended upon machinery, but he disliked an unfinished case more. Daniel Crowe stood between two deputies. Emily Carter sat near the stairs, Grace Nolan beside her. Peter Mercer remained apart, holding no deed and meeting no one's eyes. Thomas Reed watched the opening behind the artificial logs. The false flames continued moving over bare stone. Bell stood before them. Daniel Crowe stole Mercer's designs and sold an incomplete copy to Arclight Systems. When he learned Mercer possessed proof, he offered to return the originals for money and the ownership deed to Blackridge. Daniel said, "Peter invented that." Wolfe's voice came from the telephone. "No, Mr. Mercer concealed parts of it, but the physical evidence supplies what his courage omitted." Bell pointed toward the fireplace. Daniel made the 9 o'clock telephone call, asking Mercer to postpone their exchange until the following day. Mercer refused and ordered him to come at 10. Daniel then entered through the old door behind the outside woodpile. That is where his coat collected the wet North Slope pine needles later found in the passage and on the study curtain. He admitted entering. Grace said, "That does not prove murder." "Correct," Wolfe replied. "The theft, the passage, and the lies prove only that Mr. Crowe is a thief with ambition beyond his ability." Daniel's mouth tightened. Bell continued. "Crowe prepared the illusion before the meeting. He installed the exposed copper cable beneath the optical pulse fiber. He connected the hidden switch to the electronic study lock, the substitute projector, the camera archive, and the message system." Emily looked at the repeating flames. The 47-second sequence. Yes. Crowe copied 47 harmless seconds from an earlier recording. When Mercer's pulse stopped, the system replaced the true camera image with that loop. The room had appeared empty while Daniel moved through it. The false fire concealed him, fastening the cable around Mercer's wrist, delivering the electrical shock, dragging the body beside the grate, removing the proof envelope and microphone, and entering the service passage. The locked study was never an escape problem. Daniel had locked it remotely from beneath the floor. The key inside the room, the fastened windows, and the untouched snow were ornaments added to a Leroyan said, "What about the blood?" Only the fourth contact carried Mercer's blood. Peter lowered his head, Wolfe answered. Because Mr. Crowe did not operate the switch with a bloody hand. He wore gloves while moving the body, removed them after blood reached the torn palm, and used a clean cloth to press the first 3 contacts. Bell looked at Peter. The fourth contact was pressed later. Peter nodded. "When I took the deed from my uncle's hand, blood got on my fingers. I heard Daniel returning, crawled beneath the floor, and struck the last switch while trying to pull myself through. That accidental pressure activated the blue messages Crowe had programmed in advance. Thief in the cold. Crowe had intended the words to appear later and point suspicion toward the old legend of Jacob Hale. Peter's bloodied touch had triggered them early. "The pine tree ring?" Reed asked. "Another false trail," Bell said. Daniel copied the seal from the lodge deed. He wore the ring so the damaged camera image would suggest Jacob Hale or someone connected with his disappearance. Wolfe added, "The missing worker did not return from the dead. He merely remained useful to a living criminal." Thomas Reed closed his eyes. Bell explained the rest. During the generator blackout, Daniel had snatched the blood-stained lifting tool from beside Mercer's body and slipped through the loosened fireplace panel. When Peter's presence blocked his escape route, Daniel abandoned the tool on the shelf above the workshop. During the generator blackout, Daniel had snatched the blood-stained lifting tool from beside Mercer's body and slipped through the loosened fireplace panel. When Peter's presence blocked his escape route, Daniel abandoned the tool on the shelf above the workshop. Daniel had stolen Emily's watch and worn it backward while placing the substitute recording, hoping the image would identify her. He planted Grace's scarf thread near the passage stair because her false investment records gave her motive. He left his own gloves beside the stolen files, only because Peter's unexpected arrival forced him to abandon them before he could remove everything. "You were not framing yourself," Bell told him. "You were interrupted." Peter had entered the passage, seen Daniel confront Mercer, and remained hidden after the shock. He later took the deed and lied to protect himself. Grace had concealed her visit to the study because Mercer was blackmailing her over fraudulent accounts. Emily had concealed her knowledge of the camera because she feared being blamed for the spying system. Each lie had protected a separate offense. Only Daniel's lie protected a murder. Daniel looked toward the telephone. "You have Peter's word and a collection of wires." Wolfe's reply came calmly. "We also have the microphone." Daniel stopped breathing for a moment. Bell reached into the open fire frame and removed a narrow metal cylinder. The microphone was not taken from the lodge. You pushed it into the hollow center log when Peter blocked your return through the passage. Emily had recovered its damaged audio that afternoon. Bell activated the recorder. Mercer's voice emerged through static. "You will get nothing, Daniel." Then Crow's voice. "You will give me the deed or the fire ends with you." A sharp electrical crack followed. Mercer gasped. Then came Daniel's breathing, the scrape of a body across stone, and 4 words spoken close to the microphone. "Let the flames remember." Rowan stepped toward him. Daniel lunged for the fireplace opening. Bell caught his arm, turned him, and sent him against the stone before either deputy moved. Rowan applied the handcuffs. A search of Daniel's coat produced the missing arc light. Proof envelope, folded inside the torn lining where he had hidden it after leaving the passage. Its contents included copies of his communications with ArcLight systems and proof that he had sold Mercer's incomplete design. Peter confessed to removing the deed and obstructing the investigation. Grace surrendered the false financial records. Emily agreed to help recover the full camera archive. Reed gave Rowan the old files concerning Jacob Hale. A final search of the lower chamber uncovered Hale's remains inside a collapsed drainage shaft, along with the remaining ownership records. The evidence showed that he had hidden the deed before suffering an accidental fall. The blood on the beam, the abandoned tools, and his 20-year disappearance were finally explained. When Daniel had been taken away, the others left the hall one by one. Bell remained before the artificial hearth. The orange flames rose, divided, and repeated with flawless precision. They gave no heat, consumed no wood, and left no ash. I lifted the telephone. "You were right," I told Wolfe. "The fire was the witness, no Archie." A witness reports what occurred. That contraption was compelled to lie. Bell watched the cold light moving over the stone. "The coldest fires," he said, "are often built to hide the hottest crimes." From the telephone came Wolfe's dissatisfied grunt. "Mr. Bell may keep the metaphor. You will return to New York before dinner tomorrow." The 47 seconds ended. The flames began again. This time, everyone knew exactly what they were hiding.
Hope you like our video. Kindly like and subscribe our channel.